Hi, welcome to the course of Mastering SQL Server Reporting Services 2017 from scratch, step by step. My name is Kameshwar Sharma. I've been an active Microsoft certified trainer for more than 10 years. Now let me take you to the detailed course outline. I have divided this entire course into 19 different sections so far. Now I'll quickly explain to you what we will be learning in this course. In section 1, I'm going to give you the big picture of the SQL Server reporting services, and we will see how we can install SQL Server 2017, how we can install SQL Server Management Studio, how we can also install SQL Server data tools, and how we can install SQL Server reporting services, and how we can configure the reporting services as well. In the first section, I'll also explain to you how to set up the sample databases that I have used throughout this course. From section 1, you can download the complete course exercise files as well. In section 2, I'll show you how we can create some basic reports using reporting services with the help of the wizards. And then I'll show you how we can create reports manually by ourselves. We'll also be talking about the differences between the shared data sources and shared data sets. And I'll also explain to you the purpose of list data region and how we can use list data region for different purposes. In section 3, I'll give you different examples on working with image control. We'll see how to work with the embedded images, external images, as well as getting images from the database, what we call it as data-bound images. In section 4, I'll explain to you how to create expressions using some of the built-in functions of reporting services. Like I'll be showing to you how to use the if function, switch function, or how we can write our own custom code functions using VB.NET. In section 5, I'll explain to you how we can create grouping and subtotals for your reports. Initially, I'll be showing you how to do the same things using Wizard, and then we'll also do manually by ourselves. We'll also be using some special functions like running total functions while grouping and while applying subtotal. In section 6, I'll explain to you how to work with bound and unbound parameters and the differences between them. So we'll be creating some simple parameterized reports in this section, and then eventually we will be applying some kind of drop-down parameters, multi-valued parameters, and also we'll be applying the cascading parameters as well. In section 7, we will enhance our reports with some more functionalities like interactive sorting, or how we can apply drill down reports, or how do we show the columns on a dynamic basis, or how to apply conditional formatting. And also we'll talk about the document map implementation, and also we'll see how we can repeat and freeze column headers of our report. In section 8, I'll explain to you the different report actions we have in reporting services like bookmark actions, or go to report actions, and go to URL actions. In section 9, I'll explain to you how we can create cross-tab reports like matrix reports using reporting services. I'll also explain to you by making some complex reports by having more columns on the row groups, or more columns on the column groups, or more columns in the data cell section as well. In section 10, I'll demonstrate you how to work with some of the advanced controls of reporting services like gauge control, indicator controls for key performance indicators. We'll also work with sparkline and data bar controls. In section 11, we will see how we can work with charts, and I'll be demonstrating you different types of charts like column graphs, pie graphs, and bar graphs. And in the 12th section, I'll explain to you the need for custom assembly for us to create and access that custom assembly from reporting services. If you are a .NET developer, you prefer to write your own custom assembly with so many methods in it and call those methods from your reports with the help of referencing the custom assembly from your reports itself. In section 13, I'll explain to you how we can deploy our reports to a central location. So already in the initial sections of section 1 itself, we have configured our reporting services in such a way that deployment can happen. So I'll discuss that in section 13. In section 14, I'll show you how we can use SQL Server authentication to invoke our reports. In section 15 and section 16, I'll explain to you the concepts of caching and snapshots to improvise the performance of rendering of our reports. I'll explain to you how to do caching for non-parameterized reports as well as for parameterized reports. I'll also explain to you how to create snapshots for parameterized reports as well as for non-parameterized reports. In section 17, we'll see how we can embed sub-reports into our parent reports. In section 18, I'll explain to you how to work with different types of subscriptions we have in reporting services. Like we have file shared subscriptions and data driven subscriptions. I'll explain to you the differences between those two subscriptions in section 18. In section 19, I'll show you how we can consume the reporting service web service to create some customized web pages to invoke the reports. In case if you want to have your own UI or your own web pages to invoke the reports rather than using the report manager, you can easily consume the reporting web service web methods and can create custom UI, and you can easily invoke the reports as well. And this topic is purely meant for the .NET developers. I also have a lot of plans to add more topics to this course as days goes by. So let's go to the next section and start creating your very first report. In this demonstration, I'll explain to you the process of installing SQL Server 2017. You can visit this URL to download the SQL Server 2017. You can now see I have just accessed that URL to download the SQL Server software. So you can download either the free trial edition or a developer edition or express edition. So in my case, I'm going for a developer edition. So I simply click on download now. And it's just around 5.2 MB file which will run online for you. So simply click on the run button. And simply click on the button yes. So in the next screen, you're presented with three different options. What should be the installation type: basic, custom, or download media. I'll go for download media so that we can install SQL Server in an offline manner. So the select language is English, that's fine. And which package would you like to download? I'm fine with ISO. And I would like to put my files into the downloads folder and simply click on download. Now the download of this SQL Server software has been successful, so simply close this window and simply double click on the ISO file. So this is the ISO file that we have just downloaded. So I'm going to mount the ISO file and then we're going to run the setup file. Simply click on yes. Now in this opening screen of this installation, simply click on installation. And if you are trying to install SQL Server for the very first time on your computer, then click on New SQL Server Standalone Installation. And I'll show you the rest of the steps. In this screen, leave the specify a free edition as developer. Click on Next. Accept the license terms. Click on Next again. And it's going to do a couple of checks for you. Now you can see everything has been passed. There is a small warning which we can ignore. Click on Next again. And I'm planning to install only the database engine services. In case if you are planning for a full-fledged SQL Server installation along with analysis services, integration services, you might as well click on select all. So I'm going to select my database engine services. And if you're interested in the analysis services, you can select that. And you can also go for the integration services as well. But notice here, we do not have reporting services in this setup because we'll be doing the reporting services installation separately. So I'm happy with my database engine services. As I said, if you're interested, you can still go ahead and try to select the analysis services as well as integration services. But I'm happy with my database engine services selection. Simply click on Next. Finally, in this screen, we need to specify an instance name. If you are installing SQL Server for the very first time, obviously in your scenario, you will see default instance as selected because I already have SQL Server running on this computer. So it is just asking me to give a different instance name. So for the sake of demonstration, I will say this is SQL Server 2017 instance name. Otherwise, you leave it as default instance and go on with the rest of the steps. Click on next again. Now in the server configuration tab under for service accounts, we have some default accounts assigned for SQL Server Agent for the database engine service as well as for the browser. That is fine with me. I don't have to make any changes, and click on next again. In the database engine configuration, you can add your current user as the SQL Server administrator. I'm logged in as one of the user who belongs to administrators group on this computer, so I'm fine to add myself as the SQL Server administrator. Perfect. So that's my computer name and my username. Click on next again, and we are ready for the rest of the installation process, and I simply click on install. So now you can see the SQL Server database engine services for SQL Server 2017 has been successful, and I can simply close this window. Now what this installation has done to my system, you can see under Microsoft SQL Server 2017, which is the new folder for us. So we have the SQL Server 2017 configuration manager. We have some wizards, installation center, and everything. Notice here the SQL Server Management Studio hasn't been installed, and that's going to be our next step. In this lecture, I'll explain to you how to install SQL Server data tools to create our BI products like reports or SSRS packages or analysis services, cubes, and all. You can visit this URL to download the SQL Server data tools. You can notice now I've just accessed that URL, and then from here I can download my SQL Server data tools. In case if you're already having Visual Studio 2017, then you can opt for this option. In case if you're having Visual Studio 2015 edition, then you can go for this. So in my case, I'm having 2017 on my system of Visual Studio, so I'll simply click on this option. And it is going to download a file of 1.5 MB, and I'll simply click on Run button. And it is going to install the SQL Server data tools. Again, it's a smooth installation, so I simply click on Next and click on Install. And it is trying to ask me to choose a Visual Studio 2017 instance. So I already have VS on my computer, or else you can go for, in case if you do not have Visual Studio on your system, then you can go for the second option. So in my case, I'll go for the second option. In fact, though I have Visual Studio 2017 on my computer, I'm still showing you this option because you might not be having VS with you. So that's why I'm going for this. And here you need to select what supports do you need. Do you want the project templates for analysis services, integration services, and so on? That's up to you. In my case, I'm simply selecting the reporting services, and then I click on Install. Simply click on Yes, and it will do the installation of the SSDT, and we should be having the reporting services project templates pretty shortly. So now you can see this SSDT or SQL Server data tools has been installed successfully. So let's close this and try to see how to open that. So you will see an option called as VS 2017 SSDT is the option that you need to select. So this is the one that just got installed. So I'll simply click on this. We can see now we are inside Visual Studio 2017 of SSDT. So to create reporting services projects, we simply have to click on File, New Project. And under Business Intelligence, I should see my reporting services projects. So because I have not selected integration services or analysis services project templates at the time of installing, so that's why we do not have options for them, but I just have the options for the reporting services. We'll be creating reports from the next section onwards. This is just to show you that the installation has gone well. In this demonstration, I'll explain to you the process of installing SQL Server Management Studio. You can visit this URL to download the SQL Server Management Studio software, and then we can install it. You can see now I have just visited that URL, and then I'm trying to click on Download SQL Server Management Studio 17.5, and I simply save this file, which is around 802 MB, and then I'm trying to save this file. So you can notice now the SSMS setup file has been downloaded successfully. It's just an application file, so simply double click on this file to install the SQL Server Management Studio. And simply click on. So we're now installing the SQL Server Management Studio 17.5 version. Simply click on install. And it's a very smooth installation. It doesn't prompt for any details. After a couple of minutes, it should get over. So now you can see the SQL Server Management Studio version 17.5 has been installed successfully. So let's close this window and let's go back to the Start button and see where we have the SQL Server Management Studio. You will see another folder like Microsoft SQL Server Tools 17, and then you have the SQL Server Management Studio here. Simply click on that to see everything is good or not. So once we open the SQL Server Management Studio successfully, I'll also try to connect to my database engine services that we have just installed into a new named instance called as SQL 2017. Now we just specify the server name and then the credentials to connect to the SQL Server. So I leave the server type as database engine. I'm using Windows authentication to get connected to SQL Server, and I'm going to log in as the user whom I am as I'm going to log in as the user with which I am currently logged onto the system. And the server name has to be /SQL17. I type /SQL 2017 because that's my named instance I have given at the time of installing SQL Server. In case you went for a default instance, then you can just type dot and then click on connect. So now you can see we got connected successfully to our database engine services. So that means we are ready with our database engine as well as the SQL Server Management Studio. Now the next step is to install the SQL Server Data Tools to create our reports. I'll show you that in the next lecture. In this lecture, I'll explain to you how to install SQL Server 2017 reporting services. So far we were successful with the installation of the SQL Server Database Engine services. We were also successful in installing the SQL Server Management Studio and also the SQL Server Data Tools. Now it's time for us to install the reporting services. So at this link, you can click on the download button, and I have provided the links in the PowerPoint presentations attached as resources for this lecture. So I have already clicked on download and the file has been downloaded successfully. So simply click on run. So the first screen presents you to install the reporting services. Simply click on that, and because we have downloaded a 180 days evaluation edition, so I'm happy with my choose a free edition, and I simply click on next. We accept the licenses, click on next again, and install reporting services only. And it is also telling you need an instance of database engine to store the report server database, because we already have the database engine running, so that's fine for me. So simply click on next again, and simply select the install location and click on install. Click on yes and wait for a couple of minutes to get this over. So now you can see the SQL Server 2017 reporting services has been installed successfully on my system, and there is a message here Restart the computer and run the report server configuration manager to configure your report server. So we still are left with one more step. But what actually this installation has done, if you can click on the start button and go under Microsoft SQL Server reporting services, that is a new folder that got created, and inside that we have report server configuration manager. So I'll restart my computer and then I'll show you how to run the report server configuration manager utility so that in future we will be able to deploy the reports as well. In this lecture, I'll give you a quick overview on SQL Server reporting services. We'll talk about the different features of reporting services, what it offers to us, and what exactly is the reporting lifecycle and the key highlights of reporting services as well. In reporting services, we have a unique data region called as a tablets, using which we can render our data very easily. So we'll see in the coming lectures how to work with the tablets data region. Reporting services is a server-based reporting tool. So thus it takes care of the performance and then the scalability as well. We will eventually be deploying all our reports to a central location, and the people of your organization access all those reports from their own desktops by simply using the browser. Also in reporting services, we can render our reports to different formats like Word, Excel, PDF, or even CSV, XML formats, and so on. And in case if you are a SharePoint developer as well, it is possible that we can deploy our reporting services onto the SharePoint dashboards as well. And the reporting services editors like Visual Studio or Report Builder itself supports the rich formatted text. And reporting services have got various advanced controls like gauge control, sparkline, indicator, and data bars, chart controls, using which we can render our data in a graphical manner. The reporting lifecycle consists of 3 different stages like authoring your reports, managing the reports, and delivering the reports. Obviously, we as SSRS developers, we are the people who is going to author our reports. So we can create our reports either by using the report designer or report builder or even your SSDT or Visual Studio, I mean to say. So we can easily create reports using any of these tools. When it comes to the second stage of the reporting life cycle, which is the management of our reports, all our reports are stored onto a central report server database. And we can control the report execution, and all our reports can be made as secured, and we'll simply be accessing our reports in a web-based manner. So finally, as a developer, once we author our reports and when we deploy them to a central server, and it's time for us to deliver those reports to the end user in different ways. Reporting services has got different types of delivery mechanisms, like we can either email the reports directly to the concerned person, or somebody can access the reports from the report manager itself. And we have schedulers using which the reports can be generated automatically and delivered to the different people. It is also possible that you can deliver your reports directly to a network file location. So we now have some conceptual idea of reporting services. So let's go ahead and try to create some reports practically. In this lecture, I'll explain you the steps involved in setting up our sample databases. I will be using the AdventureWorks database, which you can download from this URL. And also I'll be using Northwind database, which again you can download from this URL. Now let me take you to these URLs, download them and set them up. You can notice now I have just visited my URL what is being given in the PowerPoint presentation from the github.com. So we have the list of AdventureWorks database. And I clicked on AdventureWorks 2016.back, and then I have already completed the downloading of this file. Also, I have visited my second URL, which is for the Northwind database. And when you visit this URL, you will simply have a download link, and I have downloaded the MSA file. And both these backup files I have put in a folder called as SQL Server. here I have my AdventureWorks backup, and here I have my SQL Server sample databases, which will eventually install for us the Northwind database. So simply go ahead and first try to set up the Northwind database. And click on Next. That is fine for me. Click on Yes again. Okay, it looks like I have these scripts already got executed, so it is trying to remove it. So let me rerun this one more time. Click on Next. So I click on Agree, I click on Next, and click on Next again. Next, that's it. So this is going to install the Northwind and PUBs database for me, but I'll be using Northwind database for these demonstrations. So once this is done, let me take you to the folder where it has installed. You can see here the Northwind database, pubs.mdf, and couple of script files. Everything got copied over to this special folder during the installation of that file. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply come to my SQL Server Management Studio. I click on New Query, and I'll simply run this script. It's up to you. If you want to attach the northwind.mdf to your databases collection, that's fine. But for me, the easiest way is to just run a script. So I just dragged install nwnd.sql onto this and then simply execute this. So I simply click on the execute button to run the script. And we should be having pretty shortly our Northwind database appearing under the databases list. After this is being done, I know that there are a couple of errors which may not be very serious. Just try to refresh your database collection. Now I can see my Northwind database has got so many bunch of tables and it has got so many records. So we'll be using these tables and the data of these tables for our demonstration purpose. Now the next step for me is to have also the AdventureWorks 2016 database here. Let's get that done. You can notice in the SQL Server 2000 sample databases folder, I just dropped my AdventureWorks database backup, which we have originally downloaded from the github.com. So what's my plan here? I want to put this file, I want to restore this file into my SQL Server Management Studio. So for that, let me copy this path, go to the SQL Server Management Studio, and right click and click on Restore. Click on Device, select the file. I paste that path, click on OK, and we have the AdventureWorks 2016.back. Click on OK and OK. Everything is good, and finally click on OK. So now we are having the restored copy of the AdventureWorks database. Overall, I will be using this AdventureWorks as well as the Northwind databases for this demonstration. So now you can see the AdventureWorks has got so many tables, and we'll be using them for our demonstrations. Okay, it's time for us to create our very first report. For that, you can notice I'm inside Visual Studio 2017, and I'm also ready with my SQL Server. You can notice in my SQL Server I have a couple of sample databases like AdventureWorks and Northwind. I'll be using the tables from the sample databases throughout this course. Let's say in our very first exercise, I would like to display a list of customers which is there inside the Northwind database. You can notice I have a table called as customers, and it has got so many columns and it has got some data as well. So our aim is to create a nice looking report using reporting services displaying the list of customers from the Northwind database. So this is the whole exercise in this lesson. For this, let's go back to Visual Studio and try to create our very first project. I click on File, New Project, and under Business Intelligence, select Reporting Services. And you have two options here. You can choose the first option, Report Server Project Wizard, or you may as well select the Report Server Project. I'll show you the differences between these two pretty shortly. Initially, let's go ahead and try to use the Wizard project template. Okay, I would like to save these files into my E drive, something like say SSRS training demos, and this, let's call this as SSRS demos. That's the project name, and that's the location, and then simply click on OK. So the wizard will actually help you to create the report in some simple steps. So the first screen you can simply ignore. By simply clicking on next. And here we need to specify to which database you would like to get connected. We have a couple of options here. Either I may use a shared data source, or we may as well create a new data source. We'll talk about the shared data sources a bit later. Okay, first of all, for this new data source, I'm going to give a name, something like say Northwind data source. And you can also notice here, you can choose to which type of database you would like to get connected, like Oracle or SQL Server and so on. So I'm happy with my SQL Server selection, and you can provide the credentials to get connected to SQL Server. So I'm currently happy with my Windows authentication, or you may as well go ahead and try to use the SQL Server authentication. And you can click on the edit option, and then you can specify where is your SQL Server running. So I'm just trying to type dot to get connected to my local SQL Server instance. And then I'll be selecting the Northwind database from the list of databases. You can test your connection. So that looks okay. Click on OK, and you can see the actual connection string here. So this data source is currently not a shared data source. This data source is specific to the report that we are planning to create. But at any point of time, if you wish to convert this local data source to a shared data source, you can simply click on this option, make this as a shared data source. I'll focus on shared data sources in the next lecture in detail. So currently I'm not planning to check this option. Simply click on next. Now, you can put your select statement query here, or you may as well take the help of a query builder. Okay, first of all, maybe in the first lecture, I would like to take help of the query builder. So let's click on the query builder and then choose the table and what columns you want to play with. So in the query designer, you have an option here to add tables to this design surface. So I click on add table, and I'm happy with my customers table. I click on add. In fact, if you're trying to retrieve data from multiple tables, you may as well add multiple tables to this design surface along with the relations. In my very first example, I'm just planning to work with one table, so I'm happy with that. So I say close. And you can choose which columns you would like to print. Let's say I'm trying to say customers dot start. So that means you're planning to select all the columns from this table and then also all records. Finally, click on OK. Now you can see the actual select query here. Simply click on next. Would you like to create a tabular report like a 2-dimensional, or would you like to go for a matrix which is like a 3-dimensional? We'll talk about the matrix reports a bit later. Currently, I'm happy with my tabular kind of style. Simply click on next. And here we need to choose which columns would you like to have in which place of the report. I'm interested in having a couple of some 4 or 5 columns in the details section. Let's say I'm putting the customer ID, the company name, contact name, and then the country inside the details section, which is the body of your report. We'll be talking about how we can create groupings and how we can use the page header, all that stuff in the next example. Currently, we are only selecting a couple of columns and putting them into the details section. Click on next and give some nice report name. Okay, I'm going to call this as list of customers is my first exercise. And I click on OK. In fact, you can see the complete report summary here. This report is using this data source. This is the connection string. And you have selected tabular report. And you can also see the actual select query here. Finally, you can click on finish. So once the report gets created successfully, you will find an RDL file in your Solution Explorer. In fact, if I can take you to my view in Solution Explorer, under reports, you can see there's an RDL file, which is what we call it as report definition language. And you can also notice here, this is the area where you basically design your report. Before I try to customize this report, you can notice on the left side of your screen, there is something like report data, and that has got a couple of options. In fact, when I created this report with the help of the wizard, we did specify a data source and we have also specified a select query. And that is what is this report data section is showing to you. So at any point of time, if you really want to see to which database this report is getting connected, you can simply double click on your available data sources and you go back to the same screen that we have seen at the time of creating this report. Also, when we double click on the data set, that shows you the actual select query that you have given. So if you wish to make some changes to the select query, you can even make now. So that is what this report data is showing to you, the data sources as well as the data sets information. For any reason, if you close the report data by mistake, you can simply go back to the view menu and then click on report data again. So now you know where exactly you can see the data sources information as well as where exactly you can find your own select statement that you could have given or you would have given at the time of creating this report. So now what we will do, we'll simply go ahead and try to preview this report. You know that we haven't made any kind of customizations or modifications to this report so far, but we would like to test this report as a developer. So for that, you can simply click on the preview tab. Now SSRS is obviously running your report and it will try to give you the preview of the report. So you can notice now we almost have 2 pages of information. So you can switch between the pages using this toolbar. And also currently it is displaying the information of 4 different columns, which is your customer ID, company name, contact name, and country. And this is how the report is currently looking like. Now, what if, for example, I want to apply some background color to my column headings? Or probably I want to increase the width of the company name column as well as the contact name. Yes, you can simply select your company column and then increase the column width. And similarly, click on the contact name and try to increase the size. And if you wish, you may as well increase the size of your tablets data region as well. This is your tablets data region. So after I have increased the column width of the company name and contact name, I would like to apply some background color to this column headings. So the moment you click on any column, you can notice this is your tablets data region. So I can click exactly here. So the entire row is selected and then I can simply apply some background color. Simply click on OK. Now let's go to the preview tab one more time and you can see we now have the background color for the column headings as well as the width for the company name and the contact name has been increased. So these are all pretty simple customizations so far, but we will eventually be making more customizations in the coming lectures. As you can see, while we were using the wizard, we took only these 4 columns. But my select statement obviously has got all the columns. So that means all the columns of this table you can very well use inside this report. But it's just that only these 4 columns you have taken into the body of the report. What if, for example, I need more columns in the report? For example, let's say I would like to have the city, so I can simply drag the city and then drop it exactly at the end of this list. You can notice when I'm dropping this, there is an I-shaped symbol. So if I release the mouse now, that new column will be inserted next to the contact name, or next to the company name, or next to the the customer ID, or it will be the very first column in this report. Okay, let's try to have this at the end of the report as the last column and release the mouse. So now you can see I've got my city column. Okay, what if you need a phone number? I'm trying to drag the phone and then drop it next to the city. Perfect. So this is how you now know how to add some additional columns if you wish to the report that is already been created. So let's click on preview one more time. Now I can see my city and phone very much as part of my report. Similarly, for example, I wish to have a postal code, but I want to have this between company name and contact name. No problems. Now we have the postal code between the company name and contact name, and preview one more time to verify it. So the postal code is coming perfectly. What if you do not want certain columns to be part of your report? Okay, let's say I don't want postal code now. So I can simply click on the postal code. Now you can see the tablix data region and click on that postal code stuff and right click and you can say delete columns. Preview it and we don't have the postal code. So this is how you now know how to add some additional columns to the report or how to delete the unwanted columns from the report. So let's continue to make few more customizations. For example, currently you can notice in the data set, this is the actual select statement that we have given. So by default, you're getting all the reports as part of the preview the way they are in the SQL Server table. What if, for example, I want to sort all my records based on the country in descending order? Yes, simply double click on your dataset 1 and then try to make changes to your select query. So I'm going to say order by country in descending order and then I click on OK and then I can simply say preview. So now you can see your records are now being sorted based on the country in descending order. You can switch between the pages here and finally the alphabet A is coming at the end of the report. So that is how at any point of time if you wish to make changes to your query you can simply expand data sets and then select your data sets and then make changes to the query. And this is the name that we have given to the data set. If you don't like this to be dataset 1, so I might as well call this as customers data set. A report can have any number of data sets. So each select statement is considered to be one data set for you. Also, you can notice here, this data set is based on this data source, which is your Northwind data source. And is this a shared data set or would you like to use the data set embedded in my report? Currently, the option that is being selected is this data set is embedded in my report. It's not a shared data set. We'll talk about shared data sets and shared data sources in the next lecture. Now, what do we mean by it is embedded in my report means, so this query, whatever you have given, can only be accessed in this report. But you know that in a project there can be any number of reports. I may have another RDL file and so on. So that the second report obviously doesn't have access to the select query that you have given in the previous report. But you can make that possible with the help of the sheet data sets, which we will see in the next lecture. So I can simply click on OK. Now, where would you like to see this select query is being stored as part of your RDL file? In fact, your RDL file is an XML file. Suppose if I right click on the RDL file and I click on view code, you can see the actual XML stuff of your RDL files. So now can you see this is your dataset name and this is your connection string, and you're connecting to the SQL server. This is your data source name and this is your select query, and these are the list of fields that this report is trying to access. So the complete information that we have done so far, either by using Wizard or by customizing by yourself, all these changes are stored in the form of an XML style. And that is what reporting services is doing. It is storing all your RDL files internally in the form of XML style.